there is no point, having people on your, on your buyer list that basically don't have money. Okay, that's why we start with the high growth areas, right? So make sure that you've got your high growth areas, and any buyers coming into the profile sit underneath the highest growth areas in your, in your scope of products, right? So we're going to start off with this strategic approach. We're not going to start off with, just, well, I think this might be my buyer. No, we're not. We're going to really look and see where the buyers within that market, have the most pain and the most proclivity to buy. Okay, because the whole focus of developing buyer personas is to get them high emotional resonance. They're really excited about your product service, and they move through the sales process quickly, right? So this is how we ensure that we make things as efficient and focused as possible. So the first thing we do is we start with where in our markets is the highest growth area, right? So that's where we start, and then we go on to the buyer personas. So once we've identified, this is basically the area, of the highest growth, we can then begin to go on to deep dives in terms of how many people there are and what they look like and feel like, right? So we're going to look at particularly things like the size of this market. Okay, so first of all, we need a significant amount of pain in the market, right? So we need to have, it needs to be growing, but it needs to be big enough to target. Okay, so that's one thing. And obviously you can find all of that information on LinkedIn. So how many people are there in that market that can be, targeted? And we're looking at to draw a really clear profile in our head, basically, the age and the types of roles that they're in. So if you're in a B2C area, then you're looking at what job role they have, what industries they might be in. If you're in a B2C area, you're looking at age and generation and attitude. You're also looking at where they are. So obviously for most of us in a B2B, setting, we're going to be online looking for our buyers. But obviously if you've got a physical product, you're going to be looking specifically, at a location. And then you're also going to be really critical in budget. Okay, so for example, in my line of work, if we're talking about growth engineering or we're talking about iridescent, the average order size for a growth engineering client is, typically between, 30 to 100K. But with iridescent, we're looking at, 500,000 plus. So there just aren't that many companies out there that are willing to spend that amount of money on solutions. So make sure that there's enough of a market, out there that basically, is ready and has a willingness and a proclivity to buy. And that will obviously be affected by the amount of competition in your market. And so this is again going back to why we're trying to focus on the high growth areas where we can innovate. Is a really important place to start when we're looking at our buyer persona. So then what we would do is we would, in a B2B setting, we would look at industries that were, more likely to buy. So for us, it would be regulated industries rather than industries that, are maybe focused on other elements. And then the roles within that company that would be buying the products and services. And again, one of the things that's quite interesting is when you start off, you might not necessarily know what the role is, and it might change in terms of different organizations. So, for example, in growth engineering, sometimes we're selling to operations, sometimes we're selling to L&D. At some point, the product, when we go through the sales process, we have to go through the technology, department, the IT department as well. So there's multiple buyers within that process. However, at the moment, for the purpose of this, we're not looking at the full buying decision-making unit, which we will go on to talk about when we get to the sales section. We are looking at that sweet spot that you can inspire, excite, and delight, right? So the people who are going to go, yeah, actually, we should get those people, in to work with us, right? So it's not the whole process of how you're going to sell it in. It's how do you get the attention and the awareness. So basically, you start off and basically look at the size of your market, focusing on the areas of the market that are going to maximize, you know, the efficiency of you getting them through the sales pipeline, the size of their wallet, and overall how attractive they are. This bit is really important when it comes to marketing. Okay, so you don't just want to know how many people are in the market, and you don't just want to know their roles and how much budget they've got, right? That's not really going to help you get your marketing right. Okay, what's going to help you get your marketing right, and what I mean by marketing right is make the biggest impact with the smallest budget, okay, is this idea of values and beliefs, okay, which is why your why is so important. Because what you want to do is you want to find people that have a similar why to you. And if you can do that, then when you meet in and around, your marketing meets in and around these core values and beliefs, it really does make an instant connection, right? And people then have an emotional, resonance with your brand and what you're trying to do. And so it makes it much, much easier to start and open a conversation in and around sales. Okay. So all of this stuff is very, very linked. We need to make sure that we understand our personal why. We understand what drives, our sort of golden egg, or our golden orb, as we called it before. And then we need to understand if that resonates with our target market, right? So what we're looking to do is do a kind of deep dive on the type of people that, have values and beliefs that are similar to what you're trying to what you're trying to sell. So of course they need to have the same professional values, as you. So they need to value what you, value what you sell. They also need to be able to be buying your products and services in a way that basically is possible for you to sell. So, if you look at like tender processing or stuff like that, it's much more difficult. But having said that, you're still going to be on the tender list if you have similar, values and beliefs. And then again, you're going to be looking for, buyers that have a certain risk tolerance, particularly if you're to the super innovative side of your products and services. So these values and beliefs should be pretty consistent, not only you understanding what your why is, but also they should be consistent in your buyer profiles, right? So you are really looking to do a deep dive on what these people think and believe with regards to your expertise. And if you can pinpoint that, you'll be in a much, much better and stronger position in order to maximize what's going on in your marketing. The other thing is that, you can look at is their interests and their priorities. And we certainly, have to do this, in both growth engineering and in the iridescent technology, because not all companies are interested in gamification, and not all companies are interested in being quite so innovative with AI as we are trying to be with AI. So it's really important as well is that they might have the same values, and they might go, "Roll, wow, that's really cool. I'd really like to do something," but they just might not be able to. So we've had certainly many conversations over my years in business where, the companies are desperate to basically change and have a different approach to learning and development, but they're just not able to do that. So these are the things you need to qualify out pretty damn quickly. So you might have the same values and beliefs, but if your interests and priorities are not aligned, then obviously you're not going to be able to move things on in terms of the sale. So you really, when you look at buyer profiles, this is sometimes an area that people don't give enough thought to. And the reason is that they're not clear on their, golden why, and the golden why and how that golden why meets the buyer's values and beliefs. So the other thing that you want to do is, once you've kind of identified, their kind of values and the beliefs, and you feel like you can speak to them in a language that's going to resonate with them, right? The next thing you want to look at is you want to look at their pain points, right? So what makes them be inspired to start the purchasing process. Okay, so whether you're in B2C or you're in B2B, it doesn't really make any difference. In order for a a potential client to move out of the awareness, I really like these people zone, and into, let's actually have a conversation about me giving you some money, they need to have a desire to buy, right? So then there needs to be something in their environment which basically is giving them challenges. And that can be, if you're in a B2B sense, it can be operational. If you're in a B2C sense, it can just be a longing or a need or a desire to basically do something different, have some excitement. Yeah, but that difference between, God, I'm really aligned with the values and what this company represents, and right, I'm actually going to start actively looking for a solution in this market, you need to have a pain point. So not only when you're looking at your marketing comms, and we're going to do that further down the line, not only are you looking at comms that encompass your values, your golden why, and the values of your target market, you also need to be leaning in specifically to the pain points, right, that they might have. And obviously the more you're in business, the better you're going to know these pain points. But without a pain point, you can sit in a sales pipeline forever, right? There needs to be something to link that desire to kind of move from marketing, if you like, into sales. So in terms of the pain points, you want to be looking at anything that you think you've understood before. So can I are they looking to make a change? Are they looking to do something because they need to maximize efficiency? Are they looking to improve what they're already doing? And these are all things that you can lean into once you start basically thinking about the specific content that you're going to put on within your marketing mix. So just to kind of recap. So first of all, we've got, where are the biggest areas for growth? Then we've got, what does that profile of buyer look like, and how many of them are there? And then we're looking at the psychology of those buyers and their pain points that would make them buy. Okay, so that's where we kind of have got to. And then of course, what we can do is, when we start having the sales conversation, we're then in the area of, right, okay, well, how do I hook you specifically to what I'm trying to do, right? So you're looking for leverage from their personal leverage, their desires and wants and goals and motivations on a personal level, in order to start developing a relationship. So here it's things like career advancement, team growth, revenue objectives. These are the things you can start sort of leaning into as you get moving out of marketing and kind of into the sales kind of area of things. So that is kind of the process that we're moving our market along at. So in terms of where we start at trying to obviously make them aware of what we do. Okay, and in that awareness stage, obviously you need to have the smallest number of people you're targeting with the highest resonance message, right? And that is, it needs to be in and around your golden why and your clients, and your potential clients' values. Then once we get into the consideration phase, that's when we're going to be looking at pain points, right? So that's where you need case studies, and you need specific examples of the experience. If you're in a consumer world, it might be how it feels to basically get the perfect set of skis, or the perfect herbal remedy, or the perfect whatever it might be. And then finally, you're going to move them on to a decision. Okay, now the whole point of ensuring that you you really refine your buyer personas is because you want this process to be as efficient and as short as possible. Okay, so the better you think about your customers and the emotions and the emotional resonance and the value of your customers, and how your message bonds with that, the quicker you will get to a sale. Okay, and that's obviously what we all want in terms of how efficient our business is. So that's the kind of purpose. Right, now we're going on to a really, really ugly slide. I need to apologize about the state of my slides today. There was just a lot that I wanted to make sure that we covered in terms of kind of the importance of what we're looking at. So again, these slides are in the Discord chat. So, you know, if you want to go through them, you know, in your own time, please do. So just recapping what I keep saying, we are in business to make money, right? We're not in business to make turnover. We're in business to make profit, right? The easiest way to do that is by focusing on the highest growth areas of market, right? So step one is, where is the money, right? So we are going back to that, you know, KGAR assessment, okay? So that is the first step. Then basically what we're looking at is we're looking at how likely that kind of section and area of the market is to buy. So we're looking at the emotional intensity of that segment. Okay, so a good example of that would be, you know, in the learning and technologies market at the moment, there is a real desire to basically have AI driven solutions, because you know, the reality is that if L&D have AI driven solutions, it's more likely that you're going to be able to get that into other areas of the company, right? So there is a real emotional intensity from everything to the board to the C-suite to basically do something with regards to AI. So by definition, if you've got a high growth market and you've got high emotional intensity and a desire to do something in that market, you're going to have a big proclivity, you're going to have big budgets, and you're also going to have a proclivity for action. Okay, so really think about where that kind of low-hanging fruit is within your organization, because there always is, you know, areas of growth. And again, the best place to look is really, you know, on AI, if you're confused about that. So that's step one. You need to make sure that the people that you're targeting, you know, decent sized market, they've got a need, they've got an emotional intensity, and in terms of, you know, their proclivity, their desire to buy, it's high, right? Okay, so don't have any buyers that are not maximized in step one. Okay, don't. Okay, then we go on to step two. So this is looking at the values of your particular buyers. So this is where you have to have your golden why absolutely nailed down, and you know, you need to basically move that and shape that to fit the emotional drivers of your target audience. Okay, so here you're trying to step into the role of the potential buyer, and you're trying to say, right, what values do they have that I also have that are going to basically trigger urgency, right? So because obviously what you don't want to do is you don't want to sit them with people awareness. I'm very aware of what you're doing, but they're not actually moving to the next level, right? So urgency triggers can, you know, include things like fear of missing out. You know, if you don't do this now, you know, what's going to happen. Now, you don't want to do fear mongering and horrible type marketing, but you do need to get them across the line into the sales process, right? So it's looking at you know, what is going to drive those buyers into the activity phase, right, which is purchase. And then you also want to look at sort of value perception amplifiers. So what in the mind of your buyer makes your product and service more interesting to them, right? So again, the higher the values they think, and this can be things like, you know, simply fear of missing out, you know, simply like everybody else is doing really well, but you know what, you know, why not, why aren't I? And then of course we go back to our favorite 4 Ps, right? So what does all of this mean? So once we have ensured that we are leaning into the biggest market areas, once we have made that emotional connection through our golden why and the values of the buyers, we can then specifically look at how that translates through the 4 Ps, right? And so are those buyers personas that we're coming up with, are they ideal for our 4 Ps, right? So we obviously need to make sure that there is a match. There is no point you know, trying to sell to people that, you know, aren't able to buy in terms of your product price placed promotion, right? And then the final thing is, once, you know, we know that, yes, it's a match, it's all good, we can then begin to move through the sales process with highly kind of emotional triggers and, you know, do acceleration cues through the sales process. And we can also ensure that we are getting commitment from the purchaser as they move through the sales process. Okay. So all of these things, you know, if they are aligned and they are maximized, you will be able to convert more sales. Okay. But, you know, on this incredibly ugly slide, there is some deep wisdom. So do spend some time thinking about how you can put this wisdom into action. Because the quicker that you can ensure that you have got that process, this ugly slide, streamlined, the quicker you will be able to convert from awareness into final sale. Okay. So, you know, here we're just pulling out the 4 Ps from a kind of emotional and value lever point of view. So first, how do you add more emotional value to your product, which resonates with your ideal buyer? Okay. So we're looking at how the product is built in order to kind of link in with the emotions and the emotional resonance that you know buyer is going to be most interested in. Yeah, so we're shaping the product to ensure that it's got a maximum emotional resonance. So going back to the beginning of the course, when we were talking about what sparks activity in humans, it is not a sense of logic, it is a sense of emotion, right? So we really need to be crafting our product and our product messages in and around those value drivers. Next, you know, we look at price, right? So, you know, what can we do with price in terms of, you know, when we were looking the other day at, you know, gin, you know, is there a price that basically signals exclusivity? Could it be so expensive that basically, you know, you've obviously got a higher margin, but, you know, you're sending out signals that really does mean that, you know, it's a high quality product. Can you do tiered pricing? Could you do something with early access pricing? Can you do sort of scarcity based pricing? All of these, again, are not about the price. It's about the emotion that having a pricing strategy like that delivers, you know, a sense of, you know, the product and the product experience. Okay. And then you've got the place. Okay. So again, everybody wants to feel like they are VIPs, that they're exclusive, that they're part of a club. And tomorrow, when we go on to our customer love bomb strategy, you're going to see this a lot, right? So how do we set up a golden wall, right, around our customers that, or our target customers, that makes them feel like they are goddamn superheroes and we love them more than anything else, right? So this idea of place, it can obviously be internet, it can be physical. As you know, Cosmo mentioned, there was a gin brand that used to give you a little ring. It doesn't matter what it is, but that idea that there is something, a bond, if you like, between you and your golden circle and your customers, you know, values, can really, really, you know, deliver kind of next sense in terms of, you know, loyalty and advocacy, which is, you know, critical. And then, of course, we're going into, you know, the promotion area of things. And here, this is really about, you know, once you've aligned your values with your target market, and once your target market really believes that you are like them, right? So when we were looking originally at the why, Simon Sinek's why, and, you know, a lot of you I know, you know, are not fans of Apple, but back in the day when I was a fan of Apple, this idea of being left behind, i.e. not upgrading to your next phone, was really something, you know, that you couldn't even conceive about. Now, of course, you know, nobody's upgrading their Apple phone because it's all shit. But, you know, the point is that, you know, this promotion of fear of being left out is really, really important in how we are doing our marketing and our promotion, so that we can really get the investment from our buyers to act immediately, right? And not be left behind. Okay, not be left behind. So all of these goes back to emotion, right? That is what we are trying to get our customers, on board with, right? These are our values. We understand your values. This is basically where they meet for perfect harmony in order to get acceleration cues, because what we're about here is moving people through the pipeline as soon as humanly possible, right? That's how we grow our business, right? We grow our business when we are able to convert quicker, more effectively, more cost effectively than our competition. Okay. And whilst we may not be converting, we also need to make sure that the front end of our pipeline is basically building momentum. So never can we be focusing on the back end, i.e., yes, right, the person's going to buy. We need to have a measured approach, and of course we're not there in the course. We haven't looked at pipelines yet, but just to be really clear, yes, we want to convert into sales, but we need to have that commitment catalyst and that building momentum at the front end in order to convert at the back end. So now I'm just going to give you a quick kind of look at what that might look like. Okay. And next week I will obviously use different businesses. This week has been Zavmo and Gin. Next week we will decide on another business. So first of all, what have we done? Okay, we look at Zavmo and we go, where is the money? Okay, the money is clearly the edtech market is growing, but also AI as part of the edtech market is got a higher growth rate, right? So we know we're in the right area. In terms of what does that market feel like at the moment, that market feels really, it feels vulnerable and it feels really emotional because everyone's screaming about AI. Everyone is basically, what am I going to do when the robots come? So there is high emotional feeling if you are operating in an L&D or an HR section. And there's also a deeper understanding now in the market that where people used to be happy with a one size fits all, they are now no longer happy with that, because obviously you can do more online. People understand the way people learn, and they've also spent a lot of time learning online. And so this idea that you can do more in terms of the experience that you get using AI, is driving a lot of awareness that new solutions are out there. And there's also another thing which is driving emotion, or the core drivers. People are anxious. They're anxious about their role. They're anxious about how they're developing. They're anxious to make sure that they're the right side of the AI transformation. And they're also, for a Zavmo point of view, they want to be seen as early mover, early in the market. So, a good example is that, our first pilot is, with British Gas, Centrica. And, they are absolutely, when I said to them, do they want to do a pilot? One of the key things they wanted us to do is market the association with Zavmo and Centrica and make sure that it's all on the social platforms, so that they were seen as cutting edge and at the forefront of the move into AI. So that's also something that you're looking for, organizations or individuals that might do something slightly different in terms of taking a leap. And then obviously you're looking for urgency triggers in terms of the marketing. So what's happening out there that's going to allow us to really pull on either career progression or certifications or competitive advantage, development goals, any of these things. So for us, the urgency triggers that are happening in the L&D world at the moment are future skills. So anything that you can tag to future skills means that you're likely to get more people coming into your pipeline. So basically, what does that look like in terms of the 4 Ps? So the 4 Ps, what that looks like is in terms of the product, it's all about personalization. It's all about emotional resonance. It's all about, adapting to your personal, learning style. It's all about neurodiversity. These are all things that are basically allowing people to say yes quicker. Then in terms of price, you know, you're defending your price in terms of, you know, return on investment compared to other decisions they could make. And you're also, you know, because it's AI, able to, you know, deliver, you know, have premium pricing. And then in terms of promotion, what are we doing? We're leaning into what we you know, already know about, you know, people's propensity and worry and concern about the future. So we're talking about, you know, success and transformation stories, career milestones. These are the kind of things that we're talking about in terms of promotion. And then in terms of, you know, where that's happening, you know, obviously, you know, that it's, you know, it's online because it's a digital product. Okay. And so again, when you look at your buyer personas, they need to fit into what you can deliver, right? And it needs to make sense to them. So everything comes back to this idea, your golden why, the size of the markets, and then the products and services, the 4 Ps that you can actually deliver, right? So you should be thinking about all of that when you're doing your buyer personas, right? Buyer personas do not exist outside, you know, are trying to basically drive the highest margin that we possibly can out of this. So if we look at Flora Gin again, right? So again, you know, looking at how we might, you know, utilize our understanding of buyers here with regards to the highest growth market, and, you know, the sequence of kind of that that emotional excitement and delight in order to trigger the decision and the purchasing decision. So here we can see that, you know, the compound annual growth rate is high. There's a rising demand for spirits, which we discussed yesterday. There is a real appreciation for the craft process and how that's done. And so there's this kind of increasing kind of experiential feeling in and around consumption. And that's, again, what we're looking for in our buyers. Okay. So what does the value architecture look like of these core drivers? Well, we know that the target market, they are seeking exclusivity. So these people are seeking exclusivity. They appreciate the craft of the way that the gin, you know, is made. They want to have a cultural connection to Andorra. They want to basically be seen as really understanding the value of what it means to use Andorran water or Andorran botanicals or whatever it is. And they also want to have that element of social status in terms of, you know, signaling that, you know, they are able to afford, you know, this kind of luxury drink. And so how does that translate into, you know, the actual, you know, product itself? Okay, so now we know that we want to lean into the biggest and highest growth market. We know what the core drivers are of our buyers, right? So how does that, you know, link into our products and services? Well, basically what we're looking for is we want to get them to make the decision to buy and buy now. And how do we do that? We look at the product, price, place, promotion, and we do things like limited batch releases. We might do, you know, numbered releases. We might do, you know, seasonal botanicals. We might do kind of collector opportunities with different branding. And we might do kind of event specific offerings. So hopefully that case study might be easier to sort of understand than the Zavmo one. I hope it has been. But I hope you can see there how we are basically, through an understanding of what is core drivers of our customers, we are then able to ensure that we've got the right product, place, promotion to basically maximize the opportunity by leaning into what our target market really cares about. Okay. Because again, it all comes down to velocity, right? What we don't want to be doing is doing anything that's not going to result in a sale. And this is why it all needs to be really, really joined up, okay? Because we are taking, you know, our target market on a journey. And through that journey, we are building, first of all, you know, this idea of, you know, yes, we've got the same values, then this sense of kind of urgency and action, and then finally, you know, through into close. And so that journey has got to be, you know, thought through in terms of, you know, the product, price, place, promotion. So here that ends up like is the product is obviously in and around a lot of storytelling. That's what the marketing is all about. It's all about the artisanal production process. It's all about unique bottle design. It's all about limited number editioning. The price is obviously premium. It's experience based. It's membership exclusive. And then when it comes to promotion and how we're doing our socials and how we're doing our marketing, it's about heritage storytelling. It's about nature. It's about botanical narratives. All of these things that are really going to inspire and delight our audience. And so in terms of where that means it needs to be, it obviously needs to be direct to consumers, as we've spoken about. It needs to be available on the website. And overall, that feeling of I am in an exclusive club that is all about A, a love of Andorra, B, a love of the outside nature botanicals, C, the craft process of basically small batch gin. It all makes perfect sense because the buyers are people that really appreciate that. And so by leaning into some of these things and creating a sense of urgency, right, which will, if you're doing limited number editioning or whatever, you've got clubs, you've got limited events, you will drive the desire to purchase, right? And that's what we need to get to. It's all well and good inspiring them in and around our values, but ultimately we need to find triggers that are going to get them to actually part with their cash. So that's how a really deep understanding of your buyers needs to basically move into the 4 Ps. So just to be sort of summarize these 2 kind of case studies here. So what I'm trying to get you to think about is your personas, not in terms of, kind of typical like target market, where are they, how much, how old are they, I'm trying to get you to think about your personas in terms of emotional drivers, in terms of conversion triggers, and in terms of kind of price justification. Okay, so when people talk about buyer profiles, a lot of the time they talk about demographics. Okay, but we don't really care about demographics because demographics don't buy, right? We're only interested in doing this because we want people to part with their money. Okay, that is the bottom line. Okay, so we have to be really clear what values our target market have and how those come through in terms of their emotional drivers. We have to find emotional drivers for each of our target markets. So in the case of Zavmo, holistically, it's about achievement, it's about personal growth for the organization, for the individual. For Flora Gin, it's about exclusivity and connoisseurship, right? So those are the emotional drivers. Then what's actually going to get, people to actually buy Zavmo? Well, what's going to get people to buy Zavmo is career advancements milestones. So, is this actually going to do something for my career? And that's obviously what we saw in the pilot for Centrica, where, the person that we're looking at wants to see her career grow. And she knows the way of doing that is basically by bolting on a high profile, pilot in the area of AI so that she can move her own career forward. And in the area of Flora Gin, it would be, limited availability and the social status and the overall exclusivity feeling of basically being part of something that, is, perfectly, unique in terms of what it can, what the offering is in the market. And then, of course, you need to make sure that you have got the correct price justification, because if you've taken people on a journey, okay, where basically you have made them fall in love with your golden why, you have, ensured that the values that they have map onto your golden why, okay, that you have met all of their conversion triggers, the last thing that you want to do is you don't want to be charging the wrong price. So if you've done this really well, there's obviously margin in it. If you've done this not very well, you'll find yourself in a highly competitive market where basically your price gets pushed down. So what you want to be able to do is justify the price, and hopefully you are pricing as high as you possibly can, because we don't want to work harder, we want to work smarter. You will be able to basically show a really clear return on investment in the case of Zavmo, which would, that return on investment would be, you know, career development and, you know, learning, working better within your organization. And then in terms of, you know, Flora Gin, it would be the exquisite feeling that you get when you're part of an exclusive community that really is, you know, so, you know, so close to, the, you know, all the things that make Andorra, you know, beautiful, and, you know, nature and all of those fantastic things. So when you are looking at your buyer personas, ultimately, yes, we need to find these people on LinkedIn and we need to market to them. Yeah. But really at the same time, do make sure that, as well as, you know, the numbers and, you know, oh, you know, it's going to be L&D leaders in, you know, large corporates, we are thinking about the emotional drivers, because those are going to be the people that basically are going to end up as your buyers. And this will also help you understand the messaging that you need in and around the marketing communications that we will come on to as well. So I hope that gives you a kind of feeling of what we're looking for in your personas. Okay, so yes, of course, we are talking about how many of them, what age they are, what, you know, level and role they have in companies, you know, what they do at the weekend, but we're also looking at the story behind them, right? And this is really kind of what I want you to get to. I really want you, when you're looking at your personas, I really want you to really focus on their emotional drivers and what makes them feel good. Okay, because that is going to be the sweet spot for your marketing messaging, right? And of course, it's really difficult to do that if they're not wedded to your golden why. So you need to have clarity on your golden why, and you need to make sure that the values that you're kind of leaning into are similar kind of values, you know, as your ideal target profile. So, you know, when we just look at again at all the things that you can put into your marketing communications, you know, we're looking at what add values to them, what is meaningful to your target market. Then, of course, place, where can I find them? How many of them are there? And then, you know, finally, you know, in terms of the product, what responsibility do they have and what spend do they have? So, you know, again, there is no point, you know, looking for people if in Zavmo's case, if the turnover of the whole organization is not big enough, so they can buy into, you know, what we're trying to do, the values of what Zavmo is all about. But unless they basically got, you know, budgets of $500,000 to spend on, you know, bleeding edge, you know, AI L&D solutions, there's no point us trying to sort of move them through the pipeline. Now, that doesn't mean to say that some of those people are not going to get caught up in the wind. Of course they will do, because the market's already pretty small. But it does mean that, you know, when you get an inbound lead and it's, you know, I don't know, the University of Azerbaijan or something like that, it's probably unlikely that you're going to end up getting, you know, a deal which is kind of $500,000. And again, the more that you can really understand your target market, what they're tasked with, you know, what budgets they have, you know, the more likely you are to have less, you know, padding, if you like, in your pipeline. This is obviously in a B2B sense, but we do want to make sure that, you know, we are focusing on the stuff that is most likely going to, you know, result in a sale. So that is kind of my version of personas. And again, I would really encourage you to when you're looking at your personas, make sure you understand the emotion and behind, you know, the why of why your buyers would buy. Okay, the clearer you are on what is going to drive an emotional response from them, the more likely you are to be able to get them into the pipeline. So yes, I get most buyer personas are focusing on, you know, how big's the market, what's their title, da 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 da. But to a certain extent, that's not enough to get them into the buying cycle. We really do need to get behind that, understand what their concerns are, understand, you know, how we can basically build trust with that audience in order to get them into the sales pipeline. Okay, so yes, of course, I've given you a downloadable sheet. Can you see this sheet? Yeah, great. So this is basically a buyer persona, you know, checklist. You can literally just copy and paste it, shove it into, you know, any AI and say, hey, this is my company. Can you, you know, give me an idea of the kind of buyers that I might be looking at? You know, or indeed do your own kind of research, you know, using AI. I mean, it's all out there. But, you know, again, just my parting sort of, if there's one thing that you take away from the buyer profile, is it really is about the emotional connection with these buyer profiles. It is not really about, you know, professional background or career trajectory or any of these more functional things I've got on this buyer profile list. It really is about really understanding what is going to drive a response from them. And as we know from, you know, lesson 1 in human beings, you know, a response basically happens, you know, after emotion. So we need to find out what is driving these people, and we need to lean in. Our messages need to lean in to that in order to get them to convert. Right, well, that is it from me. Tomorrow we are doing customer love bomb strategy, which should be a fun session. It pretty much says what it does on the tin. It's basically about taking customers all the way through, so your communication strategy, your communication pipeline, if you like, all the way through from, you know, getting them aware of who you are, all the way through to making them into passionate advocates. Most of the companies that I see do not have a consistent way of basically turning customers into advocates from the get-go. And so the customer love bomb strategy is a way of saying, right, as a marketing strategy, we need all of these elements to be filled out in order to consistently have a line of, you know, potential buyers going into our sales pipeline. So before we wrap, are there any questions? We do have 9 minutes that I can give you back of your precious day.
I had one, Julia. I just wondered, what does heritage storytelling mean? Is it about kind of the craft side of things?
Why can't I hear you?
Oh.
Yeah, no, I can now. Sorry, my fault. Yeah, sorry. Do you? Yes, ask questions.
The gin one, you mentioned heritage storytelling. What does that mean?
Heritage storytelling would be like, you know, the kind of history. Well, it could mean many things. So you could start with the heritage of, you know, kind of the inspiration story. So how you guys ended up coming up with it. But it could also be heritage as in historical factors of, you know, how the botanicals actually, you know, came into existence, where they might have come from. So, you know, did the fern originally come from Africa or whatever? And then, of course, you've got the actual heritage of Andorra. So, you know, Andorran culture, you know, fascinating insights to what happens up in the mountains that are so dense. I mean, what goes on up there. So it's those kind of things. And again, you know, put heritage stories from Andorra, shove it into AI and see what it comes back with. It'll give you a whole load of different, you know, a whole load of different ideas for stories. And again, what you want to do is, if the heritage angle is one of the core areas of interest that you're leaning into, then in your content calendar, that would be one of your keywords. So as soon as somebody said, you know, what's the history or, you know, the heritage of Andorra, it will come up with, you know, for a gin, because, you know, you're writing articles on that about people that might be interested in things that are really exclusive to Andorra. And of course they will do. So they'll look out for it when they come through duty free, because they're like, oh no, that's the exclusive gin in. And it's not coming through from the fact you're selling gin. It's coming through from your SEO and how you're driving that in terms of the stories of, you know, Andorra.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anything else before we close? I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And if there's any comments, you know, drop them into the chat. And yeah, lovely to see you all again. Thank you for making the effort. All right, take care. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.